So a lot is being made of this Anthony Joshua, Lennox Lewis beef. People going back and forth online, debating who's in the right and who's in the wrong. Is it Lennox Lewis who's biased because he works for PBC and envious because AJ's more popular than he ever was with the British public? And up until AJ lost to Ruiz, is Lewis concerned that AJ might eclipse his achievements because he certainly achieved more in 23 fights than Lewis did in his first 23? So you got that side of the argument, people saying that. But on the other side, you got people saying, nah, AJ needs to learn how to take constructive criticism. Lennox Lewis has been critical of many fighters out there, but it's constructive criticism because he wants to help them. He's an elder statesman in boxing, and Anthony Joshua should be able to take that criticism without taking it to heart, etc., etc., etc. So there's two sides to this story, people going back and forth. Now, I don't know for certain how the beef started between the two men and whether the things people are saying about Lennox Lewis or the things people are saying about AJ have any validity. But what I can tell you is that when Lennox Lewis was fighting, he was in a similar situation with Larry Holmes. Okay, Larry Holmes was a tremendous fighter, probably one of the most underappreciated heavyweight champions in history. But as a human being, Larry Holmes was very abrasive. In fact, I would say Larry Holmes was a bitter and envious character. That's how Larry Holmes was. So throughout Holmes's career, he displayed bitterness and envy towards his own mentor, Muhammad Ali. And I could go into the reasons why in a separate video. But yeah, he displayed bitterness and envy towards Muhammad Ali. He displayed bitterness towards Rocky Marciano. When Mike Tyson came on the scene, Holmes was bitter and envious about Mike Tyson. And then later on, when Lennox Lewis emerged as a world champion, same thing. Holmes was scathing about Lennox Lewis and, just appeared to be very bitter and envious. And the reason why is because all these guys, particularly the likes of Tyson, Ali, Marciano, even George Foreman, actually, when Foreman made his comeback in the 80s, Larry Holmes was very bitter and envious towards George Foreman as well. And it's because all these fighters were more popular than Larry Holmes was. They were getting a lot more love from the public than Larry Holmes ever did. Holmes was not a popular heavyweight champion during his reign. And he never seemed to understand that it was mostly down to him that he wasn't popular because of his personality, because he was such an abrasive character, such a obviously envious character, very abrasive. Very, very rarely had a good word to say about anybody, Larry Holmes. All right, great fighter, taking nothing away from him as a fighter, but as a person, you can be abrasive and arrogant and envious, but if you've got charisma, you'll be able to get away with it to some extent. Yeah, you'll still be able to have a lot of fans if you've got charisma, if you're funny. Holmes wasn't. Holmes was just abrasive, envious, bitter, spiteful, and there was no humor there. There was no charisma there from Larry Holmes. So that just exacerbated his problems, right? But anyway, when it came to his criticisms of Mike Tyson and Lennox Lewis, as far as I can remember, neither Tyson nor Lewis ever clapped back at Larry Holmes. In fact, they maintained this extremely high respect level for him, no matter how much smack he was talking about the pair of them. In his run-up to his fight against Mike Tyson, Larry Holmes called Mike Tyson an SOB. He said, that he's going to go down in history as an SOB. He's going to destroy himself. He's a dirty fight. He was saying all these derogatory things about Mike Tyson, some of which were true, some of which, maybe a bit harsh. But to my knowledge, as far as I can remember, Tyson never clapped back. And in fact, after the fight, Mike Tyson once again was extremely respectful towards Holmes and was heaping praise upon him, saying if Holmes was in his prime, I wouldn't have stood a chance. He's a great fighter. Lennox Lewis, same thing. I mean, here's an article actually. This was from 2001. And it is in the lead up to the Lewis-Ratman rematch. Larry Holmes picked Ratman to win again. And he's very disparaging of Lennox Lewis, saying that Lewis can't take a punch, doesn't have much of a jab. questions his heart, so on and so forth. So, and this was going on for years. Larry Holmes was very, very scathing of Lennox Lewis. Eventually they met, and for a very brief period, Larry Holmes took his foot off the gas a little bit when it came to his criticism of Lewis, because he met Lewis, and after all this scathing criticism, Lewis approached Larry Holmes, and I'm paraphrasing here, but I remember reading about this. He approached Larry Holmes and he said, "Hey, Larry, I'm a big fan." Again, after all the years of criticism from Holmes, he approaches him, says, "I'm a big fan. Could you teach me a few things, Larry?" And Larry apparently said to him, "I can teach you, but you have to fight me first." Larry was still looking for a payday and a title shot long past his sell-by date. And after that meeting, Holmes said a couple of complimentary things about Lewis. He said, "Yeah, well, one thing I can say about Lewis is he is actually a nice guy, But it didn't last long because he was right back to pretty much trashing Lewis before too long. And again, as far as my memory serves me, I can't remember Lewis ever clapping back. He just took that heat from Holmes on the chin. I guess he looked at it as Holmes is an elder statesman, same way that Mike Tyson looked at it. He's an elder statesman. He's an all-time great. He's an underappreciated champion. And if he's going to criticize me, I'm just going to have to take it. It's not a good look for me to be clapping back at a legend like this. Even though he might be, harsh on me, I can't be clapping back at the guy. It's like the Italian Americans used to say, Holmes was breaking his balls. Do you know what I mean? Breaking his balls a little bit. That's what Italian Americans used to call it. And it was kind of customary for the older guys or the more senior members of the boxing fraternity, and certainly in the Italian American community, to be able to do that to the younger guys. Almost like a rite of passage. We got to break your balls a little bit. So maybe that's how Lennox Lewis saw it with Larry Holmes. Maybe that's how Mike Tyson saw it with Larry Holmes. That's why they didn't clap back at him. But today we've got, and a lot of people are going to say this is what AJ should do. He should take a leaf out of what Lewis did. And maybe this is also why Lewis is so perplexed by AJ's reaction, because he's thinking, hang on, I took all this criticism for years from Larry Holmes and I didn't clap back, and I still showed him respect. But I give you some criticism and you start clapping back at me. It's not supposed to be like this, And I'm sure a lot of people are going to be on board with Lennox Lewis if that's where Lennox Lewis is coming from. So anyway, just a short video, kind of in defense of Lennox Lewis, I guess. Again, it doesn't mean that Lewis isn't envious. It doesn't mean that Lewis wasn't concerned that AJ might eclipse his achievements. It doesn't mean that Lewis isn't biased because he works for PBC. It doesn't mean that Lewis has hasn't only heard one side of the story because he's closer to Wilder and Fury than he is to AJ. All of those things may or may not be true. But again, if you go back to Lewis's career, he was in a similar situation with Larry Holmes and he never clapped back. And to be fair, he was taking that criticism from Holmes for years. I mean, bro, it wasn't just like 18 months. It was multiple years where Holmes was just never saying nothing good about Lennox Lewis. But then again, because Holmes was known for being bitter, this is the other side of that argument. Because Holmes was known for being bitter, maybe people didn't really take him that serious, because this is way before the days of the internet or social media or anything like that. In fact, there was a Larry Holmes skit by Eddie Murphy. Any of you can go on YouTube right now and type in Larry Holmes, Eddie Murphy, and you'll see Eddie Murphy kind of making fun of how bitter Larry Holmes is. It's a very funny little not skit, but it's a very funny little joke from his stand-up routine. And because Holmes was known and he was famous for being bitter, maybe people just within the boxing fraternity looked at him like, that's just Larry Holmes being Larry Holmes. Don't pay him no mind. He's going to sound off at the younger guys. Let him do what he does. Whereas with Lennox Lewis, it's a bit different because he doesn't really have that kind of reputation. Maybe people feel like he should have that reputation as being kind of a bitter old guy like Larry Holmes. Lewis, certainly in the United States, is very highly respected, particularly since this Fury Wilder beef has jumped off and Lewis has seemed to come down on the Wilder side, in favor of the Wilder side. Lewis has become very popular in the United States and among the boxing fraternity. So people are not just dismissing what he's saying and waving their hand and saying, he's just old bitter Lennox. Certainly not in America. Whereas with Holmes, they did. Even in America, people would just wave their hand like, Larry's talking. He always does that. He always talks smack about the younger guys who are more popular than he ever was. You know, it is what it is. So anyway, I'll leave you guys with some food for thought there. Drop your comments in the comment section below. Let me know how you feel about all the points I've raised in this video. All right, it's happening. I'm out.